Hello and welcome back here to the test machine, where today we are going to compare the WD-Red SA500 gig SSD. That's their new WD-Red NAS SSDs. We've got two of them in a RAID 1 environment, and we're going to be comparing these two SSDs against the Seagate Ironwolf 110 NAS-based SSD. Again, 2 units in a RAID 1 environment. What we're going to be testing today is a few different operations with regards to multiple copy-paste instances and compression on multiple instances at once on the SSDs. And finally, we're going to be testing 10 GBE access to both of these respective RAID volumes. Now, it's worth highlighting straight off the bat that even though we're talking about comparing these drives, we're not going to, at the end of this video, highlight an out-and-out winner. So if that's what you're looking for in this video, this may not be the one for you. The reason I'm doing this today is to show you the benchmarks you can expect from this kind of media. We will be doing cache testing with the Seagate Ironwolf 110 SSDs, caching Seagate Ironwolf NAS hard drives, and WD-Red hard drives being cached by WD-Red SA500 SSDs. But for today, we're looking at raw storage utilizing these different media types to show you what exactly they can do. Now, they've both got their own respective advantages and disadvantages. For a start, we can look at these SSDs in terms of their build quality, and we can see that first and foremost, WD-Red SSDs do cost a noticeable degree lower. They're lower in price than that of the Seagates. That is because the Seagates are designed with a more enterprise build. They're designed with a higher, more intensive NAND in question, and of course their SSDs are available in slightly different capacities due to over-provisioning. Now, the WD-Red SSDs still provide very, very good NAND chips. That's WD's own 3D NAND processors and that Marvell controller on board, which means in the context of NAS, what we're looking at is, are the inherent advantages of the hardware build of the Seagate Ironwolf going to present much of a difference against the WDs? Once again, we're not looking at which is better, we're looking at which is best for your environment, because at the time of this recording, WD-Red have only just released their NAS SSDs, but I am willing to bet that 6 months down the line you will see an enterprise class version using enterprise NAND or utilizing NVMe. It's only a question of time. And the reason we're comparing these two right now is because if you're looking at buying a NAS at the end of 2019 or early 2020, these are the two SSDs that are being recommended at a number of vendors going forward. So, without further ado, let's look at what these drives can do. Now, if we look at the SSD list here, we can see all of the drives inside our device, and we can take a good look at their specifications. So, for example, if we look at this one and look at the benchmark available on both of these disks, we can see that the IOPS was rated at 81,000 IOPS here on the WD-Red SSD 500 gig, as well as the latency and the throughput rated pretty high as well, with write performance a little bit lower. Now, I did test the drive earlier with these settings, but it's worth highlighting that the CPU was doing lots of other things at the time, and it ruined the test results. So for now, this is the true test results taken earlier today. The SSDs from Seagate, however, reported 84,000 IOPS and a higher throughput of read and write and slightly lower latency. So once again, that is because of the more enterprise build quality of that SSD and should not be used as a true indicator of comparison. Although what I will say is, depending on the hard drives you're using and the NAS you're using, these may affect what you consider to be the best SSD for you. So I've created these two RAID 1 storage pools, and I've created volumes on each of them. You may notice that the capacities differ wildly between them, and that's because although I've had these the Seagate Ironwolf SSDs at 1.82 terabytes each, what happened now is the WDs have been made available, and unfortunately the only ones I could get hold of were these 500 gigs. So that's another reason why we're not going to compare these results, because to compare 500 gig versus 1.82 terabytes, it wouldn't be fair in the slightest. Also, you can ignore the overhead there of space being total, because I've left an area of free space on the storage pool in order to take advantage of snapshots and more at a later video. So ignore the total capacities, that's not relevant here. So the first test we're going to do is we're going to be accessing the WD SSDs. We'll go to the WD Reds here, and we have got, I believe, 129 gigabytes of space, or 129 gigabytes of data on there. This is comprised of photos, video, raw images, raw video, and more from the previous few years from me. And this comprises of 31,000 files over 275 folders. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create an extra folder here, and this folder I'm going to call the number 1, and I'm going to create another folder and call that the folder 2. I'm then going to take both these folders, click copy, and then I'm going to copy all of this data into each of these individual directories simultaneously. I'm then going to time it in the background, reset the clock from earlier, and see how long it takes for this data to be written at the same time in two different instances to these respective folders using the WD Red SSD. We're not enabling anything like deduplication. We aren't enabling any compression. This is a straight copy-paste action into these folders. Throughout this, we will be monitoring the resource monitor here to see how the system behaves, and today we're using a DS3018XS. It's a dual-core Pentium-based NAS and utilizing 8 GB of DDR4 memory. So, without further ado, let's begin this operation. I'll click copy, and I'm going to make sure to do the copy and paste manually here for full transparency. So, let's start the clock now. Go into folder 1, we're going to click overwrite, go to folder 2 and click overwrite. We're then going to get the benchmark on screen. At the top we can see the background tasks being listed, and we'll leave the clock playing. And now I'm going to fast forward to the completion of this task, and I'm pretty sure you can ignore remaining time because that's going to go all over the place. Just before I go though, it is worth highlighting that although there is multiple operations taking place, each will have their own respective speed, as you can see. That will change the overall results. But once again, let's get this folder open, get that open there, and get the clock on screen, and fast forward to the completion of this task. Right, so we're going into the closing stages with each copy at around about 97% complete. It will be interesting to see if this can beat 25.5 minutes, but right now I think these two are going to be done relatively soon. After this we're going to conduct exactly the same test once again, and this time utilising those Seagate Ironwolf 110 drives. Now, it's also worth mentioning that after this we will be doing a compression test as well as 10 GBE, which is always fun, and I've got some future videos coming up soon utilising the new series of hard drives, and there we go, it's done at 25 minutes and 37 seconds. You will have to take into account a few seconds to be removed over the original setting up of this test, but for now it is now done at 25 seconds. Now let's look at the overall data we've generated, because now we would have generated a 129 gig 3 times. We have the two folders and we have two copies there, so we've now got 359.88 gigabytes on that SSD. So next we're going to make our way over to the Seagate Ironwolf 110 RAID 1 configuration, and from here we're going to conduct exactly the same test again. Click copy. From there we're going to open up and create these folders 1 and 2, and once again we're going to reset the clock and do exactly the same test once again, just to confirm it, just on screen because it never hurts. We'll get the clock reset. The time to beat is 25 seconds, and 1, 2, 3, go. We go into that first disk, paste overwrite, go back, go into the other folder, paste overwrite, open up the copy files thing in the corner, and again we will be able to see these concurrent operations here. Let's try and bring those somewhere a little bit more visible, perhaps this time, to spot the difference there with those different NAND chips and controller. So we'll leave that there. We'll do that operation there in the background. We'll make our way back into the main directory, open that, main directory, and of course get the clock up. So this is now going to run here. And from here, we're going to skip forward to the end of this procedure just to see how well it does. Fast forwarding now. Just before we fast forward, I've just realized, just looking at the CPU utilization, that the Seagate is definitely pulling more electricity in terms of the system. The CPU is utilizing far more power than previously, and I've noticed that the energy consumption on this side, which you can't see because it's off camera, is definitely higher on utilizing the SSD. So if power consumption is a concern, this may be something you'll want to take a look at. Maybe perhaps in a future test I should really keep an eye on temperature levels as well. But for now, let's fast forward to the completion of this task. Right, so we're getting close to the finish here of the Seagate Ironwolf SSD RAID 1 test, and we can see that it's definitely going to be a shorter time than that of the previous test. The drives are almost done. They're sitting at 98.8% for each individual copy action, and it should be finished any second now, whereupon we can stop at 16 minutes and 8 seconds. So again, very solid improvement there. Had to be added there that was definitely the better of the two at this operation. But once again, we're not judging these. It's about how they differ in different user scenarios. And remember, the Ironwolf costs more. I should chuffing well hope the performance would be that much improved in a simple copy-paste action. So next, let's do a quick thing here just to see how long it takes for it to delete some files. We're going to delete that second folder there, and it should be nigh on instantaneous. But nevertheless, let's delete this file. Let's delete it. May not even need the clock for this. And we're going to leave that to do its deletion, and it's going to start destroying that folder. So again, that's 129 gig, and again, we're not going to worry too much about the timing. We can estimate it a bit because there was a few seconds delay there at the beginning, but done. So probably around 10 seconds. Let's be generous, call it 10 seconds to delete that on the Seagate. Now if we make our way back to the WD and we want to delete the second folder. So once again, let's get that clock reset and we'll start the deletion with the pop-up now. And the deletion is taking place. Let's see how long it takes to do its deletion of that file. And again, we've got the speed ramping up there. And we're crossing the 10-second line there. And again, we did estimate it close, but we should have clocked that sooner. I'd say that was near enough identical. There may have been just a second in it. So, now we've done our quick deletion test there, and that's not really a full test, let's be honest. What we're going to do now is do a quick archiving test. We're going to move back to the WD, and from here, we're then going to create a zip archive of this folder. Remember, this folder is going to be 129 gig. It should appear here at 129, or 119 even. And this 119 gig here, let's double check, is that the same? Has that decided to do a change there? So we'll go back to the other one. And our file size is telling us 119 gig. Excellent. Right, so we've got our duplicates there of those folders. And now we're going to go back to the WD and do an archive speed test. This is when, I've accidentally pressed the wrong icon there, ignore that. What we need to do in this test is right click and make our way down to creating an archive. Once we click OK, this will start building the archive in this location. So I'm going to get ready on the clock. 3, 2, 1, go. And now the archive is going to be built. It's going to be there in the background, up there. We'll move the compression bar over to the side. We'll make sure we can see our resource monitor, open up the option at the top, and leave our clock running to see how long it takes to create a zip of this 119 gigabyte folder. Right, so the building of our archive folder, of that folder there, the 119 gig on the WD Red has completed, but I'm sorry to say it took so long that unfortunately I did have to go out this evening. So I've come back the following morning just to see how this performance has gone, and we can see here right now that it took 1 hour and 17 minutes 59 seconds, with the process beginning at 8:05 PM and ending at 9:22 PM and 59 seconds. So the entire archive took 1 hour 17 minutes. We can round it down a little bit for a few seconds at the beginning, but that's ultimately our overall time. So let's repeat this procedure now using the Seagate drive. Let's remove that, pop that down. Next we'll move over to the Seagate drive, and we're going to make our archive of this. So we're going to leave that there. We're going to take our clock back and reset the clock, which we've already done, and we're going to begin our archive. There, and it has begun. The process is at the top of the screen there, and this is using our Seagate Ironwolf 110 NAS SSD. You can look at the performance and you'll immediately see, just like last time, the CPU utilization spike right up, because compression of this nature is very exhaustive, and of course this is over a 100 gig folder with quite literally tens of thousands of folders. So let's leave that there, and we'll come back to the completion of this exercise. And we're now closing in on the final couple of percent of this compression. And just in case I had to disappear, I made sure to make a note of the time there. But the previous time of 1 hour 17 minutes appears to almost be being crossed. I think these two processes are going to be nigh on identical. And I think a lot of that is to do with the CPU being utilized on these devices. Now, after this test, we're going to let this test finish, of course. I am going to be running my 10 gigabit Ethernet raw access tests on these disks. I'm going to be doing a 10 GBE connection over a Thunderbolt to 10 GBE adapter into this laptop, and we're going to be bench testing what speeds we get in AJA and Blackmagic via these two disks. Once again, this comparison is mainly looking at the statistics. The overall judgment has to come down to you, the end user. And I will keep repeating that because I do think it's important, because as we've already proven, these two disks have got their own inherent advantages and disadvantages. And a different disk may be better suited to your needs of either caching or flash or live access storage. But at a glance, we are seeing a slightly higher time of compression here on the Seagate Ironwolf 110 SSDs. So now this test is about to wrap up. I'm going to start getting the equipment ready, connecting, we're done there, 1855, and we're going to complete our test of these two SSDs using that 10 GBE connection. So I'm going to shore things up now and make my way over to the 10 gigabit Ethernet connection. Right, so I've set up our 10 gigabit Ethernet connection between the NAS and this Thunderbolt 3 laptop. Now I'm going to be utilizing the Thunderbolt to 10 GB adapter from Sonnet known as the Solo 10G. I've already connected the NAS, and you can see the Solo 10 GB Thunderbolt 3 adapter is here. And if we go into the settings, you will see that I've opened up jumbo frames or jumbo packets to 9,000. This is very important to get the most open test available. On top of that, we want to make our way into the Synology NAS, and from here you want to go into the control panel, go into the network interface adapter, find the 10 GBE connection, as you can see here, and make sure that MTU is also open to 9000 here on the Synology NAS. Now, I've connected it via the Thunderbolt adapter. We've got that connection, and you may notice that the IP for the 10 GBE connection is slightly different at 169, when the connection here over 1 gigabit Ethernet is 192. Do remember that, just to ensure that we're using the right drives mapped in our test. Talking of mapped drives, I did a scan of the local area network and found the same NAS twice, once on the 1 GBE connection and another on the 10 GBE connection. This is the one that we're going to be using today. So we'll come out of there, although it should be mentioned that if you are running tests like this, you may see performance differ if utilizing a manual IP against a dynamic IP. If you're going to be utilizing 10 GBE on a NAS going forward for more permanent connections, make sure you set a manual IP. But now we've set up those connections, I've also set up 2 mapped network drives. So if we go into the PC listings, we go into this PC, we'll be able to see that I've set up these mapped network drives. Unfortunately, because of the screen recording software I'm using, these are not showing on here because of the capture rate. But take my word for it, I've set up the WD drive as mapped W and the Seagate drives as mapped S. So the first test we're going to be performing is utilizing Blackmagic. Now, Blackmagic is a test that is generally used for video editors. It tests multiple different variants of file types at video, and you've got all the settings down there. So we're going to do a test of a 1 gigabit drive, and then from there, because it's still looking for an old drive, we're going to head in and find those new drives, and there we are. There's the 169, there's the IP from earlier, and there's the WD drive and the Seagate. So for now, let's open with the WD drive. Now, another thing I'm going to add real quickly is because I'm using capture software here, as mentioned in my previous videos, you will see a dip in performance. I could have been recording off camera or using a capture card, but unfortunately I do not have this hardware freely available in the location I'm in. Consequently, do bear in mind that the performance levels you will see today may take a hit of around 5 to 7% overall. So do bear that in mind when looking at the results. But without further ado, let's do the test of the WD drives. So we're going to get this spun up, and you may notice immediately that the write speed will creep up gradually. The reason for this is because we're only using a 1 gig test file, and it's just not big enough to get a solid read immediately. But we are using 2 SATA based SSDs at the time, and these are producing pretty impressive results early on. But you will see a performance dip on that read because of the capture software. So bring that back there on screen. We can see right now that we're getting write speeds of somewhere in excess of around 600. And then on top of that, we're seeing other performances happening in real time on the read there in the background. Now, the read speeds have taken a hit, as mentioned, because of the capture software that we're utilizing today. And although they are less than the write, in a real sense, they would always be higher than write because write operations require a great deal more work. That said, those write speeds are pretty respectable for 2 SATA SSDs combined in a RAID 1. What I would say and remind you once again is that capture software is probably minusing a little bit of performance there off of the write. So do bear that in mind. Now, what I can do now is stop this test, and now we're going to do the Blackmagic test. Same 1 gig test file, but this time take advantage of the Seagate Ironwolf drives. Again, we're not going to draw a direct conclusion between these results, but we are going to look at how they both fare in a similar test. So we carry on going forward, and we can see right now that the write speeds are going to do their gradual growth just like last time. As mentioned, the build of these Seagate drives is ever so slightly different. And because of the NAND that they're utilizing, the speed may take a little bit extra time to reach that peak. And that's only because of the NAND distribution. This isn't anything negative, and this is nothing we're going to judge those Seagate drives for negatively. Once again, read speeds, bear in mind, because we're using capture software, we are going to get slightly niggly results on that read. So concentrate on the write, and still bear in mind they're going to be a pinch lower than you might get in real case scenarios. Another thing to bear in mind is we are using these for raw storage. We're not using them for caching. If we were caching, on behalf of a bunch of hard drives in a RAID environment, these results would be different. They'd still be good, but it wouldn't be this. So do bear that in mind. But overall, we're seeing very similar write speed, but that read speed is definitely a pinch higher on the Seagates overall. Once again, very tough to really call that out in this particular test scenario, and these tests should only really be used for guidance between them to help you decide which one of these drives is better suited to your own storage environment. But for now, let's cease the test there on the Seagate drives and now make our way over to AJA. AJA is another test software where we can select a multitude of different file types. We're going to go with a standard 1080p HD file, and we're going to go with a 1 gig test file once again. So we're going to go into the test disk and we're going to select the WD first, and from the settings, just to verify we aren't activating background caching, we are testing read and write. It's a single test file and the test will run continuously. Let's start the test. Now if I open this up and bring it to the top, we can also look at the disk performance as we go. Generally I never really show the frame factors at the bottom, but for SSD tests this does prove a lot more useful. We're seeing very similar results to that of Blackmagic, but again we are testing one certain kind of file type. What I'll do in a second is I'm going to change these to a larger file format and then from there get those test results. But for now we're looking at quite respectable speeds there overall in each iteration. So for now let's stop there and now make our way over to a bigger file format. Let's go for a big old 5K file. This is going to be a massive file at 4 gig. Now this is going to be a slow test. So we're only going to do one iteration of the write. So for now, this is a bigger file and you will see decreasing write figures while performing a test like this. And that's because the average over time is going to lower. So obviously the data write per second will be affected on a test that's taking longer. But we're getting that completion done now, and then it moves over to the read. We can see that that 5K test file on 2 SATA-based SSDs doing a 5K 4 gigabyte file are still pretty low, but that is to be expected from SATA-based SSDs, and I do not expect the Seagate to produce results that differ too much from the ones we are seeing. So again, we'll stop that test there, and now we're going to make our way back to that Seagate drive. So let's go back to the 1080p file. We're going to go back to a 1 gig test file, and this time we're going to look at the Seagate Ironwolf. Again, same settings, let's go. I apologise if you can hear the humming of my laptop in the background. Space is kind of limited where I am right now. Now in this test, because of the NAND that we're using, we are seeing improved write overall. The read is relatively similar overall, but in terms of 1 gig test file, because of the NAND involved, we do seem to be seeing improved results. Once again, how this appears in the real life scenarios and the file types that you are utilizing is yet to be impactful, and moreover really does depend on you, the user, and there are multiple instances where either the Seagate or the WD will be better suited to your environment. But at least in the case of this test environment, it does look like the Seagate one is performing with slightly heightened results. So now let's make our way onto that big old 5K test file. Once again, 4 gig. Let's carry on and look at the bigger one. So again, we're seeing that decrease in megabytes per second, with the WD achieved somewhere in the region of 180 to 200 odd megabytes per second write. But again, because of that NAND flash, and even by surprise to me, we do seem to be getting better results early on in those bigger file types. And that's because it is an enterprise build drive. And 5K read 4 gig files is what I would call an enterprise file. And this is where I think WD will produce an enterprise read SSD in the very near future. And I think really for all of the tests that I've done in today's video, that is the point. The WD read SSD is hitting its target audience exactly where it wants to hit. It is affordable and it is approachable in terms of anywhere up to 5 or 8 bays of storage and the file types being standard business. The Seagate Ironwolfs are good. They are damn good, but for some of you they may be overkill. Others less so because of their enterprise build quality. The result is you are getting enterprise level hardware, which unless you're going to use enterprise data, you're just not going to see the top end. And if you're looking at allocating your budget, this is information that you want to take on board. But I'm going to wrap things up here. I hope you found this series of videos helpful. I've got a few more tests to do, and of course check out the NAS Compare articles attached, which will be updated shortly after these videos. But if you've enjoyed it, click like. If you want to learn more, click subscribe, and I'll see you next time.